My name is Emily Carver, and what I'm about to share happened on a chilly November evening in 2015. I was working as a nurse at a small hospital in a quiet town in Oregon, a place I thought I knew well. But that night, everything changed. I was diagnosed with an aggressive form of pancreatic cancer, something no one in my family had ever faced before. The doctors were honest with me from the start. There wasn't much time left. For 6 long months, I battled through treatments that drained my strength and tested my spirit. I was married to Michael, my husband, and we had 2 little boys, James and Noah, who depended on me in every way. The pain wasn't just physical, it was deep, cutting through every part of me, and as my body weakened, so did my hope. Then one night, as I lay in a hospice room surrounded by the quiet hum of machines and the faint smell of antiseptic, I slipped away. My heart stopped, and I was clinically dead for what the nurses later told Michael was nearly 12 minutes. But what I experienced during those moments was beyond anything I could have imagined, a place of pure light and overwhelming love. It was like stepping into a world where time and pain didn't exist, where every burden I carried was lifted away by a warmth so powerful, I knew without a doubt it was Jesus himself welcoming me. In that heavenly realm, I felt a peace I had never known, but it wasn't just peace, it was a revelation. Jesus showed me the hidden battle behind my illness, something tied not just to me, but to the women who came before me in my family. I saw my great-grandmother, my grandmother, and my mother, all carrying this weight of bitterness and despair, like an invisible chain that passed silently through generations. I realized then that my cancer was not a punishment or a random tragedy. It was the battleground where this ancient curse was finally being broken. I saw how every moment of suffering, every tear I cried in desperation, had been a strike against that darkness. Even my prayers, whispered from a place of exhaustion and fear, were powerful weapons in a spiritual fight that I never fully understood until that moment. The pain I endured wasn't just for me, it was paving the way for freedom for my children, especially James. I saw a future where he was free from the same chains, where the bitterness that had haunted my family for over a century could no longer hold them captive. It was overwhelming to realize that my suffering had meaning far beyond what I ever imagined. When I was sent back to my body, to the room filled with quiet machines and the worried faces of my family, I knew my life had a new purpose. I had been given a mission to share the story, not just to tell of a near-death experience, but to remind others that in their deepest pain, there is hope. Your suffering is never wasted. Your prayers, even the ones that feel unheard or unanswered, are heard in the heavens. You're part of a larger story, a spiritual battle that is often invisible but very real. I want anyone struggling with illness, grief, or the weight of past wounds to know this. You are not alone. The chains of despair can be broken, and healing is possible. Jesus is alive, and his love is more powerful than anything we face on this earth. If you're watching this and feeling overwhelmed, please hold on to that truth. It carried me through the darkest moments, and it can carry you too. This story is not just mine, it's for everyone who has ever felt trapped by pain or haunted by the past. I hope my testimony brings you comfort and a spark of hope, even when it feels impossible to believe. Heaven is real. Jesus is waiting with open arms. And no matter how dark your night feels, you are never, ever alone. If my experience has touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe for more stories of faith and healing. Together, we can walk through the darkness into the light. I still remember the exact moment my spirit began to leave my body. It wasn't sudden or frightening like you might expect. Instead, it felt like a gentle lifting, like drifting on a soft breeze. I wasn't scared at all, just calm and oddly detached from the pain that had weighed me down for months. As I rose above my physical self lying there, pale and still, I could see the room from above. The dim glow of the hospital lamps, the anxious faces of the nurses, the steady beep of the heart monitor, it all felt distant, like I was watching a scene from far away. But then, something incredible happened. A brilliant light appeared, brighter than anything I'd ever seen, yet soft and welcoming. I felt drawn to it, and as I moved closer, the light took the shape of a figure, a presence so full of love and warmth that tears began to fill my eyes even though I wasn't sure I had any left to shed. This was Jesus, I realized in my heart without any words being spoken. His eyes were full of compassion, understanding every ounce of my suffering and yet shining with a promise of healing and peace that I desperately needed. He didn't speak at first, but I could feel his love washing over me like a river, cleansing every part of my brokenness. It was like every pain, every fear, every regret I carried was being gently erased. Then he showed me visions, pictures, and moments from my life and from the lives of my ancestors. I saw my grandmother, a woman I never really knew, struggling with a harsh bitterness after losing so much during the war. I saw my mother, worn down by years of hardship, holding on to anger and sadness that shaped her world. And beneath it all, a dark thread, something like a chain of despair that had wrapped itself around the women in my family for over 100 years. This wasn't just emotional pain or hard luck. It was something spiritual, a curse of sorrow and defeat that had silently been passed down. Jesus showed me that my illness was the battlefield where that curse was being shattered. Each time I had cried out to him in my sickness, even when I doubted he was listening, I had been striking blows against that ancient darkness. What overwhelmed me the most was realizing that my suffering was not in vain. The pain I endured was breaking chains I couldn't see, but that had held my family captive for generations. I saw flashes of my boys growing up in freedom, their hearts unburdened by the weight that had almost crushed me. I saw Michael, my husband, no longer carrying the silent sorrow I'd passed on to him without meaning to. And in that vision, I understood that God's plan was bigger than my life or my death. It was about healing my family's future. I felt such a surge of hope and gratitude that it was almost unbearable to come back to my weak body in that hospital bed. When I opened my eyes again, everything felt different. I was still in pain, but I carried a new peace, a purpose that would carry me through whatever time I had left. After I returned to this world, the days weren't easy. The pain was still there, and the treatments kept coming, but I was no longer afraid. I shared what I saw and felt with Michael and with close friends, not always sure how they would react. Some thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me, or the result of medication. But I knew what I experienced was real. I was given a mission to be a messenger of hope for those walking through their own valleys of darkness. My story was not just about dying, but about the power of Jesus to bring life, even when everything looks lost. I started writing down every detail, every feeling, every vision, so I could share it with others who might be struggling in silence. Because if my pain could break chains, then maybe their pain could too. If my prayers had meaning, then their prayers had meaning as well. It wasn't just a story of death, it was a story of resurrection, healing, and new beginnings. Slowly, word of my experience spread beyond the hospital walls. I was invited to speak at churches, support groups, and gatherings of people who had faced their own brushes with death or overwhelming hardship. Each time I told my story, I could see eyes light up with hope and hearts soften with the reminder that they were never alone. I met people who told me their own battles with illness, grief, or family wounds, and I realized that the spiritual battles Jesus showed me were far more common than I'd thought. We all carry unseen chains, whether from our past, our families, or our own struggles. But the good news is that those chains can be broken. Through faith, through prayer, and through God's love, freedom is possible. That's the message I hold onto every day. Even now, years later, I still feel the power of that light, that love, holding me steady when the storms of life come. And I want you to feel it too. If you are listening right now and feeling weighed down by pain, grief, or unanswered questions, please know this: you are not forgotten. Your suffering is not meaningless. Jesus is alive, and his arms are open wide, ready to carry you through whatever darkness you face. I hope my story can be a beacon of light in your life, reminding you that even in the deepest night, dawn is coming. If this testimony has touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe for more stories that lift the spirit and strengthen the faith. Together, we can walk the path from despair to hope, from darkness to light. Thank you for listening, and may God bless you richly on your journey. The days that followed my return from that realm of light were unlike anything I had imagined. Even though my body was weak and frail, weighed down by the harsh medicines and endless fatigue, my spirit burned with a new fire. Every morning, I woke up with the memory of that divine encounter fresh in my mind: Jesus' gaze, the radiant light, the deep love that filled every corner of that place where pain could not reach me. Yet, returning to the physical world was a reminder of the battle still ahead. My family watched me carefully, unsure whether I had truly come back or if this was just a fragile shadow of myself. Michael was my anchor. His quiet strength and unwavering faith gave me courage on the days when despair threatened to overwhelm me again. But the real change was inside me, an unshakable certainty that my suffering had a purpose, that my prayers were part of a larger spiritual war, one that spanned generations. I began to reflect deeply on the roots of my pain, not just the illness, but the bitterness and sorrow that had woven themselves into the fabric of my family's history. My grandmother, who raised me with strict rules and little warmth, had her own battles, losses, and regrets that she never spoke of. My mother had carried her share of grief too, her silence and guarded heart like a barrier none of us could break through. I understood now that these weren't isolated stories of hardship. They were links in a chain of spiritual despair that had gripped the women in my family for over 100 years. But in that near-death moment, Jesus showed me how the chain was breaking. The prayers I thought were weak and unheard were actually powerful strikes against this ancient darkness. My cancer was the battlefield where God was shattering the curse, and my pain was paving the way for my children to be free. I carried that truth with me like a shield every day. Even in the darkest moments of treatment, the nausea, the exhaustion, the fear, I held on to the vision of freedom for my family's future. I imagined my sons growing up without the burden of bitterness, living lives filled with hope instead of despair. I saw Michael's face softening, the way his shoulders relaxed when I spoke of this hope, even if he didn't fully understand it all. The transformation wasn't just spiritual, it was deeply practical too. I found myself forgiving past hurts, releasing old grudges, and opening my heart in ways I never thought possible. This healing rippled outwards, changing my relationships and breathing new life into our home. It was as if the chains were truly breaking, one link at a time, starting with me. One night, when the pain was particularly intense, I called out to Jesus, not knowing if I would get an answer. But in that quiet moment, I felt his presence again, soft, reassuring, and full of love. He reminded me that I was never alone, that he had already won the battle. I wasn't just surviving. I was part of a divine victory that stretched beyond my own life. That realization gave me strength to face each day, to keep fighting not just for myself, but for my family and for everyone who might one day hear my story and find hope in it. The journey was far from over, but the fear that once consumed me had been replaced by faith. Sharing this testimony is my way of honoring that journey and encouraging others who might feel trapped in pain or despair. If you're watching and your heart is heavy, I want you to know that your suffering has meaning. Your prayers are heard, even when you can't feel it. The battles you face might be breaking chains you cannot see, but God is at work in ways you will one day understand. I pray that my story brings light to your darkest moments and that you find peace in the knowledge that heaven is real, Jesus is alive, and you are never, ever alone. If this message touched you, please like, share, and subscribe. Together, let's walk from darkness into the light. I can feel the weight of the moment when I first realized that what I experienced was far beyond anything I could explain with mere words. After I came back from the place of light, I began to notice subtle changes, not just in myself, but in the people around me. It was like a ripple effect from the spiritual breakthrough I had undergone. My family, once shadowed by silent pain and unspoken resentments, started to heal in ways I never thought possible. Michael, who had always been a quiet man of faith, began to open up more about his own struggles and hopes. My sons, once tense around the topic of my illness, seemed lighter, more hopeful for their future. And even my extended family, who had long carried the burden of our shared history of grief and hardship, slowly began to experience a sense of peace. This transformation wasn't just emotional, it was deeply spiritual. It was as if the chains of despair that had wrapped themselves tightly around generations were finally loosening their grip, and the light of Jesus was pouring through the cracks. It wasn't an easy road. There were days when the physical pain was overwhelming, when the treatments felt like a cruel punishment rather than healing, and when doubt crept back in like a shadow. But every time I felt myself slipping, I would close my eyes and remember that radiant presence, the warmth, the love, the gentle power that surrounded me in that moment when I was clinically dead for 11 minutes. I remembered the vision of my family's chains breaking and the promise that my suffering had a purpose far greater than I could comprehend. That memory became my anchor, my reason to keep pressing forward. I learned to lean into God's grace even when I couldn't feel it, trusting that His plan was unfolding even in the silence. I also began to see the impact of forgiveness in a new light. The bitterness that had plagued my family for so long had roots in unresolved pain, unspoken regrets, and harsh words passed down from one generation to the next. But as I forgave not just others, but myself, I felt the heavy weight of that curse begin to lift. It was as though the prayers I had whispered in the darkest nights, when I felt most alone, were not just cries into the void, but powerful weapons in a spiritual battle. Each tear, each plea, each moment of surrender was breaking a link in that chain. And with every link broken, the light grew stronger, flooding my life and those around me with hope and healing. In sharing my story, I want to remind you that no matter how deep your pain, no matter how lost or alone you feel, there is a light that cannot be extinguished. Jesus is real. Heaven is not just a distant promise, but a living reality. And even in your darkest hour, you are not alone. I pray that my testimony will encourage those walking through their own valleys, reminding them that their pain is not pointless, their prayers are not unheard, and their battles may be breaking chains they cannot see. If this story has touched your heart, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people can find hope through these testimonies. Together, we can journey from darkness into light, from despair into hope. Thank you for listening, and may God bless you abundantly on your path to healing. The more I reflect on that moment when my spirit left my body and entered that realm of pure light, the more I realize how much it changed the way I live each day now. It wasn't just a one-time event, it was the beginning of a new life, a life filled with a deep understanding of God's mercy and the power of grace. Before, I carried so much fear, the fear of death, the fear of leaving my family, the fear of pain. But after that encounter, those fears faded, replaced by a profound peace that no medicine or therapy could ever give me. I remember lying in my hospital bed, feeling the cold, sterile air around me, and yet inside, there was this warmth, this fire of hope and love that no illness could touch. It was the kind of peace that surpasses all understanding, the kind of peace that only comes from knowing you are held in the hands of Jesus himself. Even now, as I share my story, I can feel the presence of that light surrounding me. It's not always easy to explain what I saw or felt because our human language is limited, but I do my best because I want others to know that heaven is not just a fairy tale or a hopeful thought. It's real. Jesus is alive and waiting for us with open arms, ready to welcome us home. And more than that, he is actively working in our lives right now, breaking chains, healing wounds, and answering prayers in ways we often don't see. The battles I faced with my illness were not random or meaningless. They were part of a divine plan to bring healing not just to me, but to my entire family line. I carry that mission with me every day, knowing that my suffering was never in vain. This experience has taught me to treasure every moment, every smile from my children, every hug from my husband, every breath I take. Life is fragile and precious, and I want to live it fully, with gratitude and faith. I pray that by sharing this testimony, I can help others find the courage to face their own battles, whether they are physical, emotional, or spiritual. If you are walking through a dark valley today, I want you to hold on to hope. You are not alone. God sees you. He loves you. And He is working miracles in your life even when you can't feel it. If my story has touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe so that more people can hear about the hope and healing that comes from Jesus. Together, we can bring light to the darkness and walk forward in faith. Thank you for listening, and God bless you. I want to tell you about the moment when the veil between this world and the next felt thinner than ever before. It was as if time slowed, and all the noise and pain of my earthly life faded into silence. I was there, completely enveloped in a brilliance that words cannot truly describe. It wasn't just light, it was pure love, warmth, and peace wrapped into one overwhelming presence. I remember hearing a voice, not loud, but deeply comforting, that called me by name. It was gentle, yet filled with authority and endless compassion. That voice was Jesus. In that moment, I was free from fear, free from pain, free from everything that had bound me in this life. The memories of my illness, my worries about my family, even the weight of my own failures, they all seemed to fall away. I was home. In that place, I saw visions of my family, not just who they were but who they could become. I was shown the shadows that had long followed us, how bitterness and despair had been passed down like an unwanted legacy. But I also saw something else, hope. A future where those chains were broken, where love and healing flowed freely. I was given a mission to be a vessel of that healing, to carry the light back to those still caught in the darkness. This wasn't just about me surviving cancer. It was about breaking the cycle of pain that had haunted my bloodline for generations. My suffering had a purpose greater than I could have imagined. Coming back to my body was difficult. The pain returned, the exhaustion felt overwhelming, and sometimes the hope I carried seemed fragile. But I clung to the truth of what I had seen and heard. I began to share my story, at first with just a few close friends and family, but soon it grew into something bigger. People reached out to me, telling me how my experience gave them hope and strength in their own struggles. It's humbling to know that my journey could inspire others to hold on, to believe in miracles, and to trust that God's love never fails. If you are listening and feeling lost, broken, or alone, please know this: you are not forgotten. Your pain matters, and God is working in ways beyond your understanding. The chains you carry, whether from sickness, grief, or past wounds, can be broken. I encourage you to keep praying, keep believing, and keep holding on to hope. Heaven is real. Jesus is alive. And even when the night seems darkest, the dawn is coming. Please like, share, and subscribe to help spread this message of hope and healing. Together, we can walk from the shadows into the light. Thank you for joining me on this journey. There was a moment after I returned when I felt the world around me had shifted, even though everything seemed the same on the surface. I woke up one morning and looked at my reflection in the mirror, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't see a woman defined by illness or pain. Instead, I saw someone marked by grace and resilience. It wasn't just about surviving cancer. It was about being transformed by what I had experienced beyond this life. My heart, once heavy with fear and doubt, now carried a steady flame of faith that could not be extinguished. The relationships in my life began to change too. Michael and I talked more openly than ever before about our fears, our hopes, and our faith. Our conversations no longer skirted around the hard things, but faced them head-on with honesty and love. My children sensed the change too, and I could see hope growing in their eyes, even though I knew they still worried deep down. I started reaching out to others who were struggling, those fighting their own battles with illness, grief, or spiritual despair, and shared my testimony, hoping it would light a candle in their darkest rooms. Spiritually, I was on a journey of rediscovery. I dove deeper into prayer and scripture, seeking to understand the purpose behind my suffering and the mission I had been given. It wasn't easy. Sometimes doubt crept in, sometimes the pain was relentless, but every time I felt overwhelmed, I'd remember that place of pure light and love. That vision kept me anchored in hope and reminded me that God's plans are always greater than our understanding. Now, as I share this story with you, I want to encourage you not to give up. No matter what you're facing, whether it's physical pain, emotional wounds, or spiritual battles, there is hope. Your pain is not meaningless. Your prayers are heard. And God's love is more powerful than any darkness. If this story has touched your heart, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Together, we can build a community of faith, hope, and healing. Thank you for listening, and may God bless you on your journey.